Remember, David had approximately 8 children, sons, and 1 daughter, Tamar. Every one of the children was a child of David. He was the father, but each had a different mother. The one exception was Tamar, the girl. She had no father. David, in secular terms, had fathered her, but that was with the beautiful woman at war, the prisoner at war, Ma'acha, the Eshet Yafat Toar. So we've learned the halacha. We're not going to take time out on it. He had a baby with that woman whom he wanted to make for a wife. And under the laws of Eshet Yafat Toar, the beautiful woman in captivity at war, a man would be allowed one and only one time to have physical intimate act with her. And then if he would move forward to have her become his wife, and I'm not going to go into all the details, you've done it before, she would convert to Judaism. And if there was a pregnancy from that one time before she converted, the child halachically would be considered child of that mother, notwithstanding that the mother was non-Jewish, but the child would be considered to have no father, even though we know the father. Now, I never took out time for this, but really quickly, why is that? Why is that the child born between a Jewish father and a non-Jewish mother is deemed to have a mother who is that non-Jew, but is deemed not to have a father? Why is that? We're taking it in all the things I've taught you about Eshet Yafat Toar. I never actually addressed that. I even told you about the fellow who was a member of my congregation years ago, and I warned him about, it's like another few weeks and your wife is going to be, your civil wife will be getting converted. The rabbinical council Bet Din is ready. Don't get her pregnant over the next 2 weeks because the child will not be yours. And he got her pregnant. And so anyway, the child is not his. Halachically, secularly, whatever they like. He can call the child his. And but when we call the child up to the Torah for an aliyah, Ya'amod, rise up, so-and-so, the son of the mother, but not the son of the way it normally is done, the father. So why is that? 4th time I've asked it. And the reason is, and you can take it or leave it, but this is halakha. And halakha, in these quarters, we like halakha, even if it sometimes does not mesh with other values of our day and age, which it often does not. Halakha assumes that any non-Jewish woman will have had more than one sexual encounter. That by definition, there is an immorality, or to put it the other way, that there is a unique morality that exists only in the world, only among Jews and Jewish women. That is there an exception here and there, or lots of exceptions? Yeah. But as with all rules, you don't make a rule based on an exception. For example, we say a boy is a man at age 13. I have met my share of bar mitzvah students at age 13 that had at least 30 years to go before they were going to be grown up. Okay? Complete morons. But the bar mitzvah is going to be at age 13. And occasionally you meet a 10-year-old who's like amazing. So they make a rule. On average, 13, because that's when the body shows certain developments that you would call like more manly, growing a beard, facial hair, down below also here. Same thing with women, with girls. Age 12 is when they start to show certain development on average. And there will be some that are sooner, some that are later, but on average. So you make a rule based on the average. On average, a boy 13 becomes a man. If you're going to do it by the individual, so then every time the 13-year-old is brought to the rabbi to be prepared, the rabbi's got to create a committee to decide whether this kid is a moron or ready to grow up. And then the committee votes 9-2 that the kid's a moron and needs at least 10 more years. So then the family drops the membership in the shul and they start going from shul to shul till they find a committee that thinks their moron is a grown-up kid. So as a result of that, there are rules. It is assumed that a non-Jewish woman will have had more than one sexual partner. And therefore, even though she has a husband that we know of as a secular husband, and now the baby is born, and the husband says, I'm the proud father, halakha says, we don't know. We don't know. Now you could say, what about nowadays with DNA testing? Well, the simple answer is they did not have DNA testing for the first 2,000 years of the halacha. And no one's changing the halacha now based on DNA testing. And I don't know that a lot of non-Jewish women, or for that matter, Jewish women, would like a situation where every time they get pregnant, they have to go to the rabbinical council for a DNA test. I don't know that they want it, and I don't know that they want their husbands to know it. But for those of us who live in Orthodox Jewish life, that includes mikvah, there's something different going on average in the Orthodox Jewish family. The idea of a man actually getting a wife pregnant, a lady pregnant while she's in her menstrual period, never having gone to mikvah, are there exceptions? But there's something different in the Jewish world. So it is a rabbinic given that a non-Jewish woman probably has had more than one sexual partner and more probably that a truly Orthodox woman probably has not had more than one sexual partner before she gets married. And again, are there exceptions nowadays? Of course, nowadays, but even nowadays, and throughout history, there's been a difference. That's why we talk about Taharat HaMishpacha, Jewish family purity. You don't really hear about Christian family purity, Muslim family purity, Hindu family. That's like kosher. It's like Shabbat. Family purity, it's the three things that are the hallmarks when someone comes to study to become a Jew. Well, we're going to have to teach you about kosher, and we're going to have to teach you about Shabbat, and we're going to have to teach you about family purity. What is family purity? We'll explain it. Come with a notebook. And so it's just very different. So because of that, when a child would be born to a non-Jewish woman who was impregnated by a Jewish man at wartime, he's taking her now to make her a wife. We don't know what other man had been there, so we don't know who the father is. And therefore, Tamar, born of Ma'acha, the daughter of the king of Geshur, had no halachic father, but a halachic mother, who happened to be the same mother as Absalom. And then we learned about the story with Amnon and how he ultimately raped her, brought her to great shame and personal humiliation and destruction, and how she begged him to marry her, and in the end he came to hate her and found her loathsome and destroyed her. And we learned that. And everybody felt bad. You know, people hear about things and, oh, they feel so bad. But things happen in people's lives, and other people, and it's not always their job to just change their whole lives to show how much they're hurt. But they don't feel it. You know, the highest you could ask when a close person dies, God forbid, it's like someone should say at least, I'm sorry for your loss. If they go beyond that, if they pay a Shiva visit, they bring food to the Shiva house, kosher food. But what are you going to ask people to do? You're going to ask people to go and turn their whole lives around. But in the case of Avshalom, who shares the same mother, unlike all the other brothers in the house of David, who do not share a common father, since she has no father. They all have David, but she doesn't. And they each have a different mother. Avshalom had the same mother, though not the same father. So he felt a special kinship, and he eventually kills Amnon. We learned this just before the break. Avshalom makes that big party at the time of the wool shearing, Shearing, a big party, and all the brothers come, and they start drinking, and at the right moment, this was Avshalom's plan, and he made sure that the father David, although invited, would turn down the invitation because he brings so many of a retinue with him when he goes anywhere. Didn't want to overburden Avshalom at the party, so Avshalom knew that. So he invited David. David did not go. He went back with his retinue, and all the sons of David, all the brothers of Avshalom were there. And at the given moment when Amnon was drunk, etc., 3 years or 2 years after the rape, finally Absalom gave the sign. Absalom gave the signal to his men, and they stabbed Amnon to death. They killed him. And all the brothers saw that going on, and they didn't know what the heck is going on. First of all, they all had been drinking, not necessarily drunk, but not necessarily 100% sober, and they didn't know what's going on. I mean, we're reading the Tanakh, so we see what happened. But if you actually were a person at that moment, and you see that Avshalom just gave the order to kill one of the brothers, maybe he's got a plot to kill all the brothers and suddenly jump up in line from third in line to become king to the heir apparent. So he's killing all of us. So they all fled. Nobody stopped to figure out what's going on. And the word got back to David. And they're like, and David, first information he heard is that Avshalom had killed all the sons. Like, what was it called? That red wedding. And I don't want to go beyond that. If you know that reference, you know it. It's not a Jewish reference. But like the red wedding. Everybody's getting killed, and what's going on, and no one knows. And then that's where we're going to come back in now. So we spent our time on that, and we're now at a brand new, what happens next? Here we go. I want to thank everyone for being here. I urge you to make these classes known to people that you know. We have a beautiful turnout live. I mean, really, we have a beautiful turnout live, 25 people live, and then we get about 100 or 80 on you. So we get more than 100 people. But for the same engagement, could have even more people at their time find us. Tell a friend. There actually are 1 or 2 or 3 in our class who have done that with friends, who have become regulars, who told a friend or 2 about the classes, and the friends gave it a try, and now are part of our Hollywood squares. So do let other people know as well. Okay, and give us a like. And here we go. Let's take the floating. So let's jump into 29. Okay. Avshalom did not utter a word to Amnon, but Avshalom hated Amnon. This is the sheep shearing. 2 years later, at the flock shearing, Avshalom invited all the sons. I'm going to skip because just talked about it. And they came. Avshalom said, I'd like Amnon to come. And the king knew about 2 years ago, he will not go with you. Avshalom urged and sent him Amnon. So David said, oh, all right. It is 2 years. What are you going to do? You're going to kill him? So Avshalom gave his attendants the orders. Watch. When Amnon is merry with wine, I'll tell you to strike him down dead. Kill him. Don't be afraid, for I'm giving the order. And that's exactly what happened. And all the other princes mounted their mules and fled. And it was still on the road when the rumor reached David. Lo notar mehem echad. Not a single one of your sons is alive. They're all gone. David tore his garments. By now it was well established. Vayikra et begadav. By now it was well established among the Jewish people that at news of a death, not only a mass murder, but just a natural death of old age, one tears one's garment. Vayishkav artsa. And David lay on the ground. You may remember he did something similar when the first baby born to Bathsheba, who died in that first week. Remember that. V'chol avadav nitzavim kruei begadim, and all of his servants stood around him and also had their garments torn. Now Yonadav, the son of David's brother, in other words, his nephew, V'yan Yonadav ben Shima, achi David. David had a brother named Shima, and Yonadav was his son. David's nephew said to his uncle David, "My lord must not think that all the princes have been killed. Good news. Al yomar ani et kol hanarim b'nei hamelech nemitu. They're not all dead. Ki Amnon levado met. Only Amnon. Ki al pi Avshalom hu'eta shuma. Because this whole thing was an Absalom plot. Miyom anato et Tamar achoto. From the day 2 years ago when Avshalom's sister Tamar was raped. Therefore, ata with an ayin, with an aleph it means you, Y-O-U, with an ayin it means now. Therefore, I mean, look, it's bad enough your son has just been murdered, but still there's a difference of having one son murdered and let's say 6 sons murdered. Therefore, al yasem aroni hamelech libo devar limor kol bnei hamelech metu. Therefore, don't internalize that all your sons have died. Ki im Amnon levado met. Only Amnon. Again, Amnon, not saying only, but only Amnon. What about Avshalom? Avshalom assumes his father's going to have him killed. So there's some interesting stuff on that. Halacha. When a person, we'll use the name, Sven, but imagine Sven is a Jew. When Sven kills somebody, goes to kill somebody, if he first is given a warning by 2 witnesses, and he acknowledges the warning and proceeds to kill or murder, he gets the death penalty, al pi halacha, according to Jewish law. Jewish law death penalty that the Torah talks about requires advance formal warning by 2 witnesses and acknowledgement that you heard the warning. What if you kill let's take O.J. Simpson killing Nicole. There was no witness. There was nobody to give him a warning. Now, anyway, it would have been a non-Jew, though, of course, the one he killed was Goldman. But you'd have to have 2 halachic, over age 13, Shomrei Shabbat, Sabbath observer witnesses, male. So there was no witness anyway. So if O.J. Simpson were a Jew, and we know he's not from the Adam Sandler song about Hanukkah, that's our proof, our documented citation that he's not Jewish. If you kill somebody without a witness, without a warning, and without an acknowledgement, what becomes of him? Does that mean he gets off the hook? Let's say we do know he killed him. Let's say there were 2 witnesses, but they didn't get out a warning. Or they got out a warning, but he didn't acknowledge that there was noise rustling in the leaves. Or only one of them got out the warning, not both. Or there were 2 witnesses, but they were 12 years old, or they were 18 years old, but one of them doesn't keep Shabbat. But for some reason, there's a flaw in the required aspect to make it death eligible. So what's the halacha? Well, first of all, the Goel Hadam, a redeemer of the blood. Just as when there's an accidental killing, if God forbid Sven kills another person accidentally, Sven has to run to a city of refuge, Ir Miklat. There were 6 Arei Miklat, 6 cities of refuge, 3 on the west of the Jordan River and 3 on the east of the Jordan River. One toward the north, west of the Jordan, one towards the center, west of the Jordan, one towards the south, west of the Jordan. Likewise, on the east, one towards the north, one towards the center, one towards the south, so that it would be accessible. They didn't have planes and trains and automobiles, so it would be accessible to the accidental killer. To be able to get you, the killing was in the south, and you're trying to, if there's only one city all the way up north. So there were cities, and the deal is that the accidental killer has to get to the Ir Miklat, the city of refuge, and stay there. The Goel Hadam, the redeemer of blood, an immediate relative of the deceased, of the killed, has the right, according to Jewish law, to go vigilante and kill that guy, unless that guy gets into the city of refuge. Once the guy's in the city of refuge, the redeemer of the blood no longer can touch him. Can go into the city of refuge, buy a hamburger, but can't hurt that guy. If that guy at any point walks out of the city of refuge, the Goel Adam could wait right outside and kill him. So that way, what the Torah is basically saying is, you killed somebody by accident, or there was a lack of proper warning, witness, etc. You're getting away with it a little, but you're not completely getting away with it. You're going to be restricted in your ability to move around, your mobility, for an extended period of time. And if you ever walk out, so this is serious stuff. You didn't get away with it. And you stay in the Ir Miklat until the Kohen Gadol dies. In the United States, it's like a guy is a justice on the U.S. Supreme Court until they die, or any Article 3 judge, any federal judge. In the same way, a killer in this city of refuge stays until the Kohen Gadol dies. And there's interesting Gemara, we don't have time for it, about how the mother of the Kohen Gadol would say prayers and would actually go to the cities of refuge and try to be nice to the people there in refuge, that they should have Rahmanis on her son and should not sit praying for her son to die. There are people in the United States who pray for certain justices on the Supreme Court to die. I remember there was a guy, his name is Heimer, I think Hymer, a pastor, a Christian pastor, back in the 70s, right after Roe v. Wade, who would have public prayers. He'd bring his church, his people to Washington to recite prayers to God that the justices who passed Roe v. Wade should die. It would emphasize, don't hurt them, don't touch them. They attack God, and now, or the way they normally pronounce it is God. They attack God, and God will, and the prayers were not fulfilled until a long time later, by which time he was gone and his church was gone. But that's the thing about a person who kills by accident or on purpose and does not meet death eligibility. So why am I going into all of this? For a purpose. The reason I go into so many laws that we learned in Tanakh. What happened here is that is Avshalom chayav misa, chayav mita. Is Avshalom under Jewish law death eligible? Is he supposed to be executed? And the answer is no, because there was no warning. Didn't he know you're not allowed to kill someone? Of course he knew, but the law is he had to be warned at the time. Everybody was drinking. Probably would not have been a kosher warning, even if it was warned because the guys were drunk. But regardless, also if the witnesses are your relatives, they're not kosher witnesses. For example, when I do a wedding, I have to make sure that the two witnesses to the ketubah and under the chuppah to the ring, and that they're not related to each other or to the bride or the groom. And so the brothers could not have been witnessing. The brothers didn't know what was going on anywhere. That's why they right away got out of Dodge. because they couldn't figure out what's going on. There were no witnesses. There was no mourning. So you could not have him executed. That's going to be important going forward. But his concern right now is my father's going to kill me. And I don't mean like a kid comes home, just they got a 9 p.m. curfew. There should be such a thing now. And it's 3 a.m. My parents are going to kill me. His father could kill him. And that's an interesting conflict of laws. If you've ever been in law school and ever took a course in conflict of laws, that's an interesting conflict of laws. Because on the one hand, you have laws that say there was no witness, there was no kosher witness, and you can't have witnesses that would be kosher if they're your relatives. But on the other hand, we know from Rambam on Thursday nights that the king has authority to order that anybody in the kingdom be executed without giving a reason. Like the ultimate executive order, the execute order, sign and execute order. And under Rambam, where he's bringing the halacha. So you've got a conflict of laws. Well, bottom line, Avshalom is not going to sit around waiting 2 years while it goes to the lower court, goes on appeal, and finally goes to the Supreme Court. He gets out right away. Now, where's he going to go? So where would you go? Let's say, no, and it's not a fair question after a 3-week vacation. So we're a little bit rusty right now. And we don't have our WD-40 nearby. But where would he go? So I don't expect anyone to be able to answer that question. The other day I did ask someone, there was someone helping me with something, and I wanted to make the point that we do it twice every week. And I mentioned, so we do it 2 times 52. So how many of those do I do a year? And the person couldn't answer. 2 times 52 is 104. So you can't ask questions that, you got to be careful because you don't want to embarrass somebody. So anyway, it's a hard question, but let's think it out. What did I gave you clues in class tonight? Who's Avshalom? He was born to a father and mother. Who's his father? Well, we said that's David. And who's his mother? We said that is the woman taken in captivity. He was born to the Yafat Toar. Her name is Ma'acha. And she was the daughter of the king of Geshur, Geshur, or Gimel, Shin, Vav, Resh. So she's the non-Jewish daughter of the king of Geshur, whom David took for a wife. And her son Avshalom now maybe is wanted dead or alive. And he's not sick, because he doesn't have Rambam to ask. First of all, Rambam hasn't been born, and so on and so forth. So he beats a hasty retreat to Geshur, where his grandfather, not a halachic grandfather, but his civil grandfather is still alive, the king of the country. So now you really have interesting conflict of laws, king versus king. And so he runs to Geshur, sanctuary city. And David is not going to take his nation to go start a war with Geshur to kill his son, who maybe he shouldn't be killing anyway. And that's the mess. That's the legal mess going on here. So the sons are alive, good news. Amnon is dead, bad news. David is sitting Shiva. And the son whom he wants to kill, because he's not now analyzing whether he's allowed to under standard law, and maybe still would be allowed to under monarchy law. His son is not around to be killed because he's gone to sanctuary. It's like that guy who gave up all of the secret documents of the CIA or whatever. And I know you're going to send, at least 2 of you will send little chats with the guy's name. Was it Ed something? Or anyway, who was it played by Ed Norton? I don't know. But anyway, the guy ran to Russia to be safe and stuff like that. So he's running to Geshur. Okay, what do we have here? But Snowden, good for you, Beth. Okay, And thank you. And so at this point, Yoav is the general, his commander-in-chief of his army. In modern American terms, that would be like, I guess, the defense minister, Hegseth and Austin. A little bit, it's a dual position. In those days, the Secretary of Defense, or the defense minister, to Pete Hegseth or the Lloyd Austin, also was the chief of staff. Also would be like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and would go to battle. So it wasn't like now where we have the commander in Iraq or the commander in Yemen or wherever we are. And you have the head of the Army and the head of the Navy, the 5 chiefs of staff and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, separate from the political decider. Here, you have Yoav is everything, just as we learned about a guy named Avner ben Ner, whom we learned was a great tzaddik and had been the chief of staff and secretary of defense for the house of Saul. People like Shaul himself, and then his son, Ishbosheth, who ultimately was assassinated. We learned that. So Yoav makes a determination. This is militarily not good for the king to be all tzamished. The king is so upset now. His head is on this mess. His son is dead and killed and assassinated. And the assassin is his son, because his daughter was raped. And if he kills, is he allowed to kill and does kill? But he's taking sanctuary at the country of his mechutanim, of his in-laws. I mean, it's hard to picture, but the king of Geshur is his mechutan, is his mechutan. That's the in-laws, because he's married to Ma'acha, and that's her father. She's going to go and make war to kill his son in the house of the in-law. That's like Shakespeare stuff. That's Macbeth. And he's not in the mood for Macbeth right now. And so Yoav knows that in war, not only does the defense minister, the secretary of defense, lead the troops in battle, but the king goes also. Something you can't imagine. You can't imagine any American president going and saying, Acharai, everybody, follow me, charge. Even maybe George Washington, but by then when he was first president, he didn't do it. But there were 1 or 2 times he did go straight into the battle. The Whiskey Rebellion, he did risk his life, actually, against fellow Americans who went crazy. But by and large, that's not how it works in the Western society, like in America. You imagine, no matter your politics, Obama leading people into battle, or Clinton, or Trump, or the younger Bush, particularly. The older Bush was a war hero, but not when he was president, or Reagan. I mean, it just doesn't happen. Okay. But David has to go to battle. But if his head is all tzamished, if he's all confused and he can't get his act together. So Yoav takes upon himself, I got to snap the king out of it. Now, how am I going to snap the king out of it? And we see something for the second time. This is the overview of what we're going to learn now. And it makes it easier to follow it in the text. This is going to be the second time we run into this. It's hard. Let's try it this way. I always like to use current events where possible, because it makes it more understandable. No matter what your politics is, whether you love Trump and you're MAGA, or you're never Trump, or you want to impeach him, whatever your politics, Trump is not an easy guy to just go to, even if you're a trusted advisor, and just give him advice. He does apparently listen to advice, much more than his public image. He'll do the tariffs, and then a few days later, he reverses himself. is he simply reversing on his own, or did Melania convince him, or did Witkoff convince him? People do have a way to reach him sometimes, or he'll announce he's going to do this, and he doesn't do it, and and then he changes his mind again. He's going to do it, and sometimes it's because he's crazy like a fox. And when he announces this crazy thing, he totally expects to reverse himself. And that's a strategy. I'm going to announce something crazy. I'm going to make everybody around me scared. Then I'm going to offer them to reverse it if they compromise, which they never would have done in the first place if I hadn't started off so crazy. So there's that. Sometimes you can be reached, sometimes you can't be reached. And sometimes you try to convince him, and he fires you. Like, again, everybody's got their own politics. But depending on what you thought about Pence signing his validating the election in 2020, Pence was very pro-Trump, but he really believed he had to validate the election. But that was it. He's finished. He's finished. Now, maybe he was wrong to validate the election. Obviously, the really strong MAGA people said it was a stolen election. But there are a lot of people who love Trump and say, what are you going to do? But that's the end of Pence. And he can't run for anything in the Republican Party. He's like finished. Okay. So with that background as an example, to understand this, people felt sometimes you can't quite approach King David and just give him good advice. Sometimes certain things he can't handle it. You can't handle the truth, says Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. And it's like maybe he could handle the truth, but his close advisors come to the conclusion he can't handle the truth. Or we don't want to, maybe he can, but I don't want to be the one to find out he can't. So we learn, for example, when the prophet Natan wanted to give him God's word that the king did bad in the incident with Bathsheba, and Uriah the Hittite, Natan did not exactly go straight out. He instead came with a story about a rich guy who was traveling, and there was another rich guy, he had a lot of sheep, and he welcomed the visitor to his house, and nearby there was a very poor man who had only one little sheep, and the rich guy said to the visitor, I'd like to welcome you and give you a meal as my guest. And then the rich guy sent out someone to grab the sheep of the poor man, leaving the poor man with no further sheep. And then the rich man slaughtered the sheep, made a beautiful meal. And the prophet said, what do you think of that? And David said, the rich man should be killed. That's terrible. And then the prophet says, you are that rich man. Because Uriah had only one wife, and he wasn't a man of great substance, material, and you took his wife. You didn't have enough. You have so many wives. The Gemara says 18 or 30. He's allowed to have 18. There's another Gemara says he's allowed to have 36. We know he had at least 6 or 8. Plus he had pilakshim, concubines. Why couldn't you let this guy have his one wife? So that's how Natan got the story to him. And tonight, Yoav determines, rightly or wrongly, he makes an executive decision that he doesn't have the right to make. And he knows it, so he's going to present it to the king to get the king to make the decision. It's like, honestly, I mean, not only Trump, but Obama on the other side of the spectrum and anyone in between. If you're the Secretary of State, you can't just go around and make a peace deal with 2 warring countries without checking first with the president. It's got to get the president's okay. You can't just make deals like that. You can't, Witkoff or whoever, the other guy, you can't just go around issuing tariffs. You could recommend it to the president, work on it with the president, but only when the president says, you leave it for the president to do it. So in the same way, Yoav decides, I need David essentially to extend a royal pardon to Avshalom for killing his brother, the king's son, Avshalom's half-brother. I need a formal pardon, like in America. So Biden pardoned all those people, either Biden or his pen, his auto pen, pardoned all those people. And then Trump, trying to balance the politics to focus on Tanakh and not Democrat, Republican. And then Trump pardoned a similar amount of millions of people over January 6th. And once they're pardoned, they're pardoned. There's two things in America: is commuting and pardon. When you commute a sentence, that means it's on your record forever, that they were convicted of whatever. But if they were sentenced to 20 years, it might be commuted to 2 years. So they don't have to have the same punishment, but it's on your record. When you get a pardon, that means you've never been convicted. It gets wiped out. And even if people read in the newspaper that you were convicted, doesn't matter, it never happened. And you could actually sue somebody who would say you've been, because it's off your record. So we're trying to get here. Yoav wants David to pardon Avshalom, because Yoav doesn't have that authority, but he wants a full pardon, that it's so much off the record that Avshalom will come back and reconnect with David, not at all afraid that it's a scheme in order to get him back from Geshur so he can get killed by his father. And he wants to know, from Avshalom's point of view, not only will my father not kill me, but none of the brothers will kill me, as go alei hadam, pursuers of the blood, redeemers of the blood. Immediate family avenging the killing. I need to know I'm pardoned. So Yoav wants to get David to pardon him. So he comes up with another one of these metaphors. So here's the metaphor. Yoav looks for an old, haggard lady who looks 30 years older than she is, and looks like she's 30 years older than she is because she's been crying her eyes out for years and years, or months and months, or days and days, but she's been crying a lot. And she looks like a mess. Not just a mess, but like a real mess. And he wants to get that lady to meet up with King David at the palace, and to come to David as a petitioner among his citizens, his subjects, seeking a royal decree or judgment or legal holding. And she is to do the following. And Yoav, now the women in my class, and women who are a little less wise because they're not in my class, no, but the women of today are very brilliant. And then they're like men. A lot are brilliant, a lot are stupid, a lot are in between, like men. And then we can get into a different debate that there any difference at all. But women are very smart. And actually more women nowadays in the Ivy League than there are men, because of between DEI and, quite frankly, women are doing better on admissions exams than men. And there's a whole bunch of sociology behind that. So women very smart. In those days, women did not get an advanced education. Their minds were not challenged. The person I met yesterday, with whom I just matter-of-factly said, it's like 2 times 52. So it's like, how many times a year? And the person could not say 104. I never would have imagined that. I learned a life lesson at age 71. Don't assume that someone in America who is articulate can multiply 2 times 52. So why is that? Because the person never had that person's mind trained to multiply by 2. For most of us, that would be surprising. But if your mind has never been trained, it hasn't been trained. And so, or maybe she knew, but felt pressure to answer. Women were not educated in those days. And therefore, you're asking a woman to go up to the king of the country, who has a reputation of power to have someone executed, like especially if she lies to him, takes up his time in front of the entire court around him in the palace, asking him questions, making up stories, and wasting his time. That's pretty scary stuff. So Yoav is looking for an extraordinarily intelligent woman with great stature, with not stature in the sense of being famous. Actually, she should be not known at all, but with great presence, like a charisma, even though she's going to look terrible, like she's all messed up. Nevertheless, there are certain people that just project. If you remember, I don't know why you should have seen Spartacus, Stanley Kubrick's Spartacus, 1960, 65 years ago. But in Spartacus, towards the end of the movie, Marcus Aurelius Crassus, the Roman general, has now conquered all of the gladiators, and they're all handcuffed, and they're just strewn over the battlefield, alive, many of them. And he just wants to find one. He wants to find their leader, Spartacus, and he will then let all the rest of them live as prisoners, as gladiators and whatever. But Spartacus is the one he wants, the leader. And that's the guy he's going to crucify. And no one wants to give away Spartacus. He's the hero. And then finally, a different guy, Tony Curtis, actually Bernie Schwartz, gets up and decides to be a hero and say, I'm Spartacus, to save the life of Spartacus. And then the next thing you know, another guy gets up and says, no, I'm Spartacus. And then before you know it, thousands of them are all going, I'm Spartacus, I'm Spartacus, I'm Spartacus. And the Roman general realizes, she starts walking around among them and looks, and they all look unshaven, defeated in battle, worn out, full of dust. But of all of them, there's one he looks at where all the others look away. That one looks him back in the eye, and he knows that's Spartacus. So Yoav is looking for a woman like that who will not crumble under pressure. And he tells her, here's what I need you to do. I need you to go to the palace, wait your turn. Actually, they won't let you in because you're a woman. So start screaming, even if you have to sound a little crazy. But since you're going to be screaming, be pro-MAGA. Like, start yelling, I love King David. More properly, Hoshea et HaMelech. May God save the king. God save the king. God save the king. And they'll let you through. You'll tell them, I need to ask a question of the king. God save the king. And they'll let you in. And so that takes skill also if you're a dignified person who does not scream crazy, to be able to scream crazy out of character is a thing. But I need you to do that. That'll get you in the door. Then you bring me up to the king, and you tell the king the following. You are a widow. Your husband is dead. You have no husband. And all you had left is 2 sons. And your 2 sons got into a big fight in the field. And nobody stopped the fight until one son killed the other son. And now that other son is dead. All you have left is that one son. Your husband's gone. One of your 2 sons is gone. And no one's ever going to marry you again. Particularly in those days, but even nowadays, there are a lot of people that would be of quality, particularly, who'd be hesitant maybe to marry someone. Not only her husband died, which is a widow, but one of her sons killed like, you don't want to get involved with that family. I remember when I was a attorney at Jones Day, there was a secretary there who was quite above average in appearance. Let's just leave it like that. I'm a rabbi. I'll leave it at that. Quite above average in appearance. Everybody at Jones Day knew that I'm also a rabbi. I was a rabbi. At that time, I'd been a rabbi 10 years. Now I'm a lawyer. But it was in my background. I had been a rabbi. And every so often, someone with a personal problem at Jones Day, after being sent to the employment assistance program to speak to a therapist, after one or two unsuccessful sessions, would ask me if I had some time. They know I practice law now, but I was a rabbi and they need to talk to me. And I had to decide, do I want to get involved in something? And she came to talk to me. And her problem is she needs to remarry, but nobody wants to marry because she has two kids. One is a 14-year-old girl who got pregnant with a black classmate in high school. And the other is a 15-year-old boy who is in prison now because he was with friends while they were holding up a 7-Eleven in the middle of the night, and he was arrested and convicted as an accessory. So every time she meets somebody, they find out her son's in prison as an accessory to a 7-Eleven. The daughter's she's got a black kid in the house, and what should she do? And in a moment like that is when I mentioned, right now I'm practicing law. But a person like that, it's very hard to marry a man of quality, or even maybe any man. Indeed, the man who would say, you have a son in prison for being an accessory to a holdup and a daughter, I'll marry you. What's that all about? So this lady is told by Yoav to go to the king in the palace and say, my husband's dead. One son killed the other son in the open field. No one wanted to get involved. Now there's a death sentence out on my other son who's trying to get out. And I'm asking the king, don't let them kill my son. Don't let them kill my son. I've got don't let relatives of mine, uncles, aunts, kill my son as go alei hadam, redeemers of the blood, saying that here's somebody who was killed. I'm going to redeem his blood as his relative, his uncle, his cousin. I need a royal decree that my son who killed the other son is pardoned, that it will be against the law to hurt that son, and anyone who does kill him will be in violation of the king's decree, and himself will then have to be executed by the king. And I'm asking you for that because I have no one left. You see, there was no one who warned my killer son, who warned either of the two sons who were trying to kill each other with a proper halachic warning. There was no warning, two witnesses, quoting the law, yada, yada. And that leaves Goel Hadam, redeemer of the blood. And it's all I have. Because if that son gets killed, I have nothing, no legacy to leave behind. I have nothing. And the king starts to prepare to issue that pardon out of his great heart of mercy. And he starts to realize, and she says something that gets him to realize that she had no two sons in fight. Her husband, if she's married, is alive. She'll look fine after she washes off whatever she's got on her face. This is a setup to help him realize that he can't kill Avshalom. He can't have that. If one of his sons killed another son, he will not be doing any good. He'll be cutting off his nose to spite his face by now killing the son who killed, who in certain ways is his favorite son. And not only does he not want Avshalom really killed, he doesn't want anybody else killing him. And if his heart was to say, well, technically, if a Goel Hadam, a redeemer of blood, kills your other son before that kid gets to the city of refuge, technically that's the law. But yeah, I could issue a pardon. He's basically realizing I can issue a pardon to Avshalom, who killed one of my sons. And that will allow Avshalom to come back to Israel from Geshur. And I won't have to invade Geshur. And I won't have to go to war in my mechut in my in-laws' land. And Avshalom will be politically, socially rehabilitated. And it will still take me time, but I will start to heal. And from Yoav's point of view, Yoav doesn't care about Avshalom. Yoav doesn't care about Amnon. For all I know, Yoav considers them all a bunch of spoiled brats. But Yoav wants the king back in business, at the front, in battle, leading the nation. And for Yoav's purposes, thus begins the reconstitution of King David. And so, as we close tonight's class, as I've given you that overview, and actually next week when we read the text, you'll see fine points, but this is the overview. The last thing, as the lady starts leaving, David says, "May I ask you a question?" And she says, "Yes, Your Royal Highness." And he says, "Was Yoav behind this?" And she says, you're such a genius, and you have the brain and the intellect of angels. And yeah, Yoav put me up to it. And we'll leave it at that for now. So I want to thank everybody for coming back. We have a new storyline that we're right in the middle of. The rehabilitation, the exit of Avshalom, the rehabilitation of Avshalom, the reconstitution of King David, and moving forward. Thanks for being back, and look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.